It's almost like the author tried really hard to make Feyre unlikable, at least to me. Hey guys, welcome back to the read-along for A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I'm Kat, and this time we'll get to chapter 28 to 30. Chapter 28, Feyre gets dressed up and sent off because it's too dangerous for her to stay at the spring court. And when she goes downstairs, they run into Lucian, and he disagrees quite a bit with Tamlin's decision to send her off, and he shows that by spitting on the ground in front of him. And I'm just sitting here like, is this how the High Lord emissary relationship works? Because I feel like that's the kind of thing that might get you like let go or killed depending on how the High Lord feels that day. And even if they are friends and disagreeing to such a level would be generally fine, maybe you don't need to show that with such a level of disrespect. But that's just me, I guess. They have a bit of a teary goodbye. There are no actual tears, I think, but they say goodbye, and Feyre refuses to say I love you back even though she feels it. I guess in an attempt to prevent her from coming right back. She gets glamoured and put to sleep, and then only wakes up when they arrive at a fancy mansion. And she looks at the human servants that are gathered outside to welcome her and thinks, unfinished, graceless creatures of the earth. Last time I checked, you're human too, so wow. I mean, Tamlin did something to your vision, yes, and maybe she can still see more things than the average human being, but wow, she certainly thinks of herself as better now. And it's not the last time this comes up. Unsurprisingly, the mansion belongs to her family because Tamlin went overboard with I'll take care of your family, I guess. And she meets Nesta and Elaine, and then thinks, wow, they only had to deal with such simple things like relatives dying and fortunes being left. Because at this point her family still thinks she was with the rich aunt and only just returned because said aunt died. And I'm not sure I would describe relatives dying as a simple thing. The thing that happens, yes, but that doesn't necessarily make it simple, but okay. Feyre clearly thinks that she is dealing with far more dire things than anybody else at this point. While Elaine seems really happy to just have her sister back, Nesta is kind of standoffish and not in the bitchy way that we know from her from the beginning of the book, but almost suspicious. Feyre looks at her and thinks to herself, she'd been made differently from something harder and stronger than bone and blood. She was as different from the humans around us as I had become. Yeah, Feyre definitely thinks of herself as different and better than everybody else now. Now, if a high fae would consider themselves better than a human being, they are immortal, they have magic, they have superhuman strength, I see it. But Feyre? I mean, the arrogance on this girl is just out of this world. Her family explains to her how they ended up with all of this fancy stuff, the mansion, the money. Apparently a stranger appeared at their little cottage and asked them to invest money for him because he couldn't do it himself. There's a stranger at your door offering you money to do something for him that he can't do himself. That doesn't sound fishy at all, does it? If this were a modern airport, this is how you get yourself arrested, but back then, or in this world, it just makes you rich. Feyre shows us once more that she's not quite certain what she even thinks about her family or what her feelings are, because she sees how well they're doing, and then she hits you with, I wasn't certain whether I should be furious or relieved that they'd gotten on so well without me. Did you want him to starve instead? Like, make up your mind, girl. Also, they didn't get on so well without you. They got on so well because Tamlin stopped by and just showered them in money. That's not getting on well, that's somebody else saving your ass. Chapter 29, Feyre spends some more time with her family. She hangs out with Elaine, who tells about the socialite season and how Nesta has suddenly lost all interest in the social aspects of I don't know, rich people's lives, I guess. And Nesta also tried to visit Feyre at her aunt's at some point, but returned very soon after because her carriage broke down. Feyre is a bit concerned about that because it feels like Nesta is still suspicious and standoffish, and she might know something that she's not letting on, but Feyre doesn't go to talk to her or anything because that would be too easy. Feyre goes back to their old cottage while pining for Tamlin really, really badly. And there's really a weird shift between her and her family. Obviously, all of her family are now relatively happy, ignoring Nesta's suspicions, I guess. But suddenly Elaine is described as her favorite person. She's so loving and kind. And where was all of that in the first few chapters of this book? Because we didn't see any of that really beforehand. But suddenly Feyre is very close to Elaine and she's very near and dear to her heart. In chapter 30, Feyre visits the town, or the village that she used to live. Well, they're still near the village. I don't know where this mansion came from out of nowhere, if she is this close to the village that they were previously in, but whatever. Feyre visits the village and runs into Isaac and his wife. And while looking at him, she thinks, human, he seemed so human. Yeah, just like you, because you're still human. I don't know. I didn't particularly like Feyre beforehand, but now she's really driving it home that she is above everybody else. And boy, I can't wait for her to fall off her high horse, but it's probably not going to happen. Feyre hands out some money to the poor people in town and then heads back to dig up a garden patch for Elaine. When Nesta comes to talk to her and tells her, yo, this is all nonsense, there is no rich aunt. I tried to visit you and that didn't work, and then I went to the wall and tried to get through to find you, but she couldn't do that either. And it turns out that all you need to get through a glamour is an iron will. What does that say about Feyre? Because she couldn't get past any glamour by herself. But Nesta just needs to think about it and everything goes poof. Also in this conversation, you really have to wonder, did Nesta have her whole personality switched out while Feyre was away? Because none of the stuff you learn in this conversation, where she says that she tried to save Feyre herself, makes any sense for the person we've met in the first few chapters of this book. They have a heart-to-heart talk and Feyre actually spills everything and tells Nesta about Tamlin and all of the other things that have happened. And during this conversation you also learn why Nesta despises their father so much. She blames him for their mother's death. I'm not sure what he was supposed to have done, but she thinks he could have done something better or actually saved their mom somehow. And she ends this conversation with like, well, how far would you go for your High Lord? And Feyre is just like, yeah, you're kind of right, but she doesn't say this out loud, but Nesta thinks, yeah, you would go to the end of the world for your High Lord. I'm really glad that Nesta can extrapolate all of this passion and devotion from this short conversation between the two, but I don't know. Now we know Feyre is so desperately in love with Tamlin and pining away, but for now they have planned a ball to celebrate Feyre's return, so that will happen in the next few chapters. So overall, not a lot happens in those chapters, a lot of conversations, I suppose. Feyre shows a hint of maturity when she runs into Isaac and his wife because she just wishes them well. So that's the one good thing, and I guess the way she deals with her sisters is not too bad either, but outside of that, the arrogance on Feyre in those chapters where all human beings are suddenly beneath her, it's just like, oh bitch, please. And then her sisters seem to have had their personalities exchanged or something. Elaine is suddenly super popular with all of the servants. She's kind and loving and everybody's just happy to see her. Okay, maybe part of that was true for the beginning as well and she just couldn't show it because she was too miserable or too busy surviving, but she didn't help with the survival of the family. They all left all of that to Feyre, so okay. But it's worse on Nesta. She never seemed to have given a shit about Feyre, as far as we could tell from the big opening chapters of this book. And suddenly she's all like, yeah, I went to the wall and tried to get into faerie territory to save you. It's like, really? You sure about that? Because that doesn't sound like Nesta at all. Oh yeah, and some bogus way of making money. Yeah, a stranger showed up and wanted us to invest for him. It's like, yeah, kind of sounds like those emails you get from Nigerian princes or whatever. It's like, yeah, that makes perfect sense, but you know. Well, nobody questioned it, and now they're rich. And Feyre is still miffed that her family got along okay without her. Would she have been happier if she had returned and there were like 3 graves by the cottage because they all starved? Or I really can't tell. And I'm not sure I want to try to understand Feyre more than necessary, because by now she's so unlikable that I couldn't care less. I just hope it doesn't take too many chapters to go back to the Spring Court and the actual politics and backstabbing and murdering or whatever, because if I have to read several chapters just about her hanging out at a ball now, no, I assume it will just be 1 chapter and something happens and then we can go back to more interesting things. I don't know. At least while just hanging out with her sisters and doing garden work and visiting the village, you can't go all that wrong with world building because not much happens there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to help the channel out, and let me know in the comments how far you would go to save Feyre. Or somebody you actually like, you know. Because I wouldn't do anything for Feyre, but that's just me. I'll be back next week with another video. Thank you guys for stopping by. Bye!